Greetings and welcome to College Planning with the National Alliance for the Advancement of Haitian Professionals. I am Dr. Ketsia Sadler, founder of College Cafe, and your moderator for this webinar series. Welcome to another installment in this amazing series where we try to bring all types of information to our future college students and current college students just to help you all make better decisions and just enhance your life. So before we get started with tonight's program, which I think is a little different from what we usually do, we want to thank our partners in this process. So first, we want to thank the National Alliance for the Advancement of Haitian Professionals for allowing us this opportunity and platform to talk to you all. Our next partner we'd like to thank is Golden V. We also have Parent Matters, and finally, College Cafe. So we want to thank them again for being part of this journey with us. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce who our panelists are. So our first panelist is Miss Jasmyn Lee, who is currently a page with NBC Universal. She's an NBC page at their New York location located at 30 Rockefeller Plaza. She is a Howard University graduate with a major in communications and has about 5 years of experience in media and entertainment. She also had a minor in computer science and Spanish. Our next guest is Mr. Korey Petgrave, who is currently a senior vice president in corporate finance at Stern Brothers, which is one of the nation's largest certified 100% woman-owned business enterprise investment banks. That is a mouthful. And Korey is a Columbia University graduate with a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering with a minor in entrepreneurship and innovation. Ms. Nygera Pierson Mutis, MS LCSW, is a social work administrator, clinician, trainer, and professor who is passionate about serving and empowering those served. She's got over 20 years of diverse experience in the human services field, and she has her bachelor's degree from Morgan State University, a master's in human services administration from the University of Baltimore, and a master of social work from Columbia University. And our youngest panelist tonight is Miss Soferri Bennett, a 12th grader at Tampa Preparatory School. And she has had various leadership roles at her school, including being secretary of the Medical Explorers Club, and she co-founded the High Achievers Club in 11th grade. She was inducted into the Cum Laude Society, meaning she is in the top 10% of her class, and inducted into the National Society of High School Scholars. So thank you to these panelists. And every time I do these shows, there is always a connection. So 3 of the 5 of us here are connected to Columbia University. So what's the likelihood of that? Yeah. So anyway, so let us get started. So I'm going to I thank you for sharing your bios, but I always like the panelists to share their life story because you can put so much more emphasis as to what you've done so far. So everyone can take about a minute or 2 and talk about your academic and career journeys. If you want to start with high school, and Ms. Bennett, if you want to start with middle school, since you haven't reached that college level yet. So I'll start with Ms. Lee first.
Yeah, I started in high school. I did mostly dancing. The decade up to high school, I was in ballet, and I knew I wanted to do something creative in my future. I wasn't sure what it was. I didn't know if I would continue dancing, but I wanted to explore all the avenues I had, so I focused in theater when I went to school. From there, I got into the track of media and entertainment and actually creating content behind the scenes, and that's why I applied to Howard University on their TV and film track. From Howard University, I joined a lot of great organizations. I did have my first year online, which was a unique experience. But I would say, if anything, it definitely supplemented my experience, as the media industry is probably one of the first to actually adopt a lot of the online platforms that we have now. So in a way, I kind of see it as an advantage. You have to take it for what it is. And then at Howard, I joined a lot of great programs. I was even a part of things like Parents Matters, and I was able to get a few internships with AMC and another creative ad agency in California. From there, I applied to the NBC Page program, and now I am wrapping up my 1-year fellowship time with NBC and hoping to find a job with them.
Nice, thank you. All right, Mr. Great.
Yes, thank you. So I grew up in a largely Jamaican household. Both my parents are Jamaican. They actually moved to the States in 1994. Um, and I'm actually the youngest of the three of my siblings by a lot, the youngest of which is 13 years older than me. And early on, academics was always a focus for sort of my household. Anyone knows Caribbean parents, that's always the main focus, right? Um, so I grew up in the Newark, New Jersey area. And through a program called Better Chance, I was actually able to get accepted into a college preparatory middle school and high school named the Hudson School, which is how I know Miss Sadler. And yeah, from there, academics again was always a focus for me. College was always a major focus of mine. And I was fortunate enough to get into Columbia University. In high school, if you were to ask me sort of what I wanted to be, the answer would have been a lawyer. So I went into college sort of thinking that my plan was to sort of do engineering and then maybe go into like intellectual property law. I finished with my major in mechanical engineering, like you said, and also minored in entrepreneurship, innovation. But during my time at Columbia, I knew kind of quickly that I wanted to sort of stay in the New York area. And also I wanted to transition to more so focusing on finance. And really with that engineering background, I was able to sort of leverage all of the connectivity at Columbia to connect with companies like Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, et cetera. And I actually got an internship in my junior year as a rising senior, actually, at Goldman Sachs in their sales and trading business. From there, ended up joining full time, and I spent about 5 years at Goldman Sachs. Then I transitioned from Goldman Sachs to Morgan Stanley, where I focused on banking. Spent about a year and a half there, and then I transitioned to a smaller boutique bank based out of St. Louis, but we do have an office here in New York City where I focus on investment banking and corporate finance. So it kind of just goes to show, sometimes it's not all about what you start off with. You can kind of just take several paths depending on what your major is, and it really allows you to launch off into different areas of expertise.
Yes, thank you. Miss Pierson Mutis?
Good evening, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you this evening. My name is Nygera Pierson Mutis, and similarly, I come from a West Indian background, raised in New York, and within our family, the focus was education as well. So it was not an option. You were going to college, which was inspiring and created lots of thoughts about what I could attain. My grandmother was a Columbia University graduate as well. And so I always had that in the back of my mind. But I kind of went against the grain and was the only one in my family to attend an HBCU. And so proud that I did, and still was able to, complete my studies at a Ivy League institution. During my time in undergrad, I knew that I wanted to work with people. People are fascinating to me. But I never foresaw myself as someone who'd be a therapist listening to people every day. I thought for sure I'd run my own nonprofit. I'd support people in various ways. However, after some time in working in human services, I realized that I did want to provide clinical mental health services, especially for children. And so I've spent over 20 years working with children and families, really supporting them as they navigate life's challenges. And at the current time, I work as a psychotherapist at Monroe University, supporting college students as they navigate. I have the opportunity to teach at Columbia within the School of Social Work, and also take private clients within my own organization, Abound Peace Mental Health Services. And so, doing all of that really allows me to support people, to meet them where they are, and to help them navigate as they are surviving college and beyond.
Great. Thank you so much. And Ms. Bennett, we'll close out with you.
As aforementioned, I am only in high school, but I think to start off in middle school, I think in middle school I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I really liked science and writing. Those were my favorite subjects. So I had the most fun in those classes. We didn't really have clubs either at my old middle school, so I didn't really have those opportunities either. So I was just kind of figuring out my passions through my classes. When I got to high school, I took biology in ninth grade, and I think that's really when I realized I definitely wanted to do something in science. I just loved the class. And after that, I joined the biomedical concentration, which is something that's offered at my high school. And you are required to take core science classes for it, advanced science classes, and do a biomedical internship for your senior year. So I kind of took that route at the beginning of my sophomore year. And once I got into my sophomore year, I started to finally get involved in clubs and take leadership roles. I joined a club called Medical Explorers, which basically involves just a lot of presentations with different physicians. This allows students to really explore their passion for medicine. And in 11th grade, I also got involved in the Writing Center, which is like basically where I peer tutor other students and help them with their writing. So those are definitely my main activities, and where I kind of, or the activities I am most involved in that reflect my passions. Um, and yeah, in 12th grade now, I'm definitely focusing on applying to college. I guess just trying to figure out where I want to go. I definitely think, though, at this moment in time, I'm planning to pursue medicine and go to medical school. Um, and yeah, I think I either want to be a radiologist or pathologist, but I'm definitely open to changing my mind because I know I'm young and I haven't even stepped foot in college. So, but yeah, those are basically my future plans and my main interests.
Nice. Thank you so much. Well, for those of us on here, we're probably well, one thing you mentioned was the writing center. I know there was no writing center when I was in school. Miss Pierson Mutis, did they have writing centers when you were undergrad? No.
Not undergrad. In graduate school, definitely. Yeah,
Okay.
but not undergrad.
Right. And Mr. Petgrave, Miss Lee, did you all have writing centers at your schools?
I
I
believe
think so.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. We didn't have that, so such an advantage going to school these days and then going off to college and having those type of supports to help you survive the process. So okay, let's jump into tonight's topic. So Ms. Bennett is probably the first high school student I've had as a panelist, and I was really drawn to her project that she's working on at school and having the High Achievers Club, and then noticing that imposter syndrome was one of the topics that they addressed through the club. So that was not a word that was around definitely when I was in high school or college. So I kind of want us to talk about the imposter syndrome term and how it relates to each of us, whether if you want to go back as far as high school and middle school, did you ever experience it? Or what about when you got to college, and are you still dealing with it now? And how have you transitioned? So let's start with you, Mr. Petgrave. Imposter syndrome, is this something that you experienced or not?
Yeah, for sure. I think especially when I got to college, I think back to my first semester freshman year, and obviously I was majoring in engineering, and it just meant a lot of math and science courses. And you don't really realize how fast the college pace is until it sort of hits you. And I'm thinking back to a few classes in particular that, just kind of grew incredibly stressful. And there were points in which, obviously everyone at Columbia, everyone at all of these schools are excellent, come from excellent backgrounds as well. And I think that was really sort of the first time I got to experience where I felt like school was a real academic challenge for me that I wasn't quite sure how I would overcome it. In high school, not to say that it was a breeze, but I feel like I was very comfortable in high school and middle school. And then at Columbia, it was kind of just like, you're compared to sort of the best of the best in a certain sense. I'm thinking back to one course in particular where all of our physics and math courses were kind of graded on a curve basis. So that means it's basically graded relative to others. And I remember the first physics grade that I got back on a test, it was not a grade that I've ever seen before. And then that moment of initial shock really got to me. And then it took me some time to realize, okay, it's graded amongst the curve. So that means, there are people who've done better than you. There are people who've done about the same as you. And there are people who have done worse than you. And one thing that I think that really opened up in my eyes is like really making the effort to seek out additional resources. So I bring that up because I think that's immensely important as anyone begins sort of their college journey. And you really, because of course you're in college, if you're going away, you're kind of no more parents at home. So you feel a bit more by yourself. But a lot of these schools have immense support systems, whether it's teacher assistants, professors, guidance counselors, really making sure that you're aware of that network, because I feel like going into college, I wasn't super aware of it, right? I kind of just felt like it would be kind of like high school. And I do think college, you definitely want to take more and more advantage of those resources to help support you. And then I think thinking on imposter syndrome, just how it shows up sometimes in the workplace, I definitely from time to time experience that now. If there's a certain financial topic, financial company, something that I'm not as prepped up on as maybe my peers, or maybe as I feel like an expert might be, sometimes you can feel inadequate to some degree. But I think it's really about ensuring, again, tapping back into those support systems, whether it's a mentor, whether it's a colleague, because you really find that, especially in the workplace and in college, everything becomes collaborative. So it's, about reaching out. There are times when you're able to offer support, but also being receptive to that support as well. I hope that answers the question.
It did. Thank you. Ms. Pierson Mutis.
I think imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon, as sometimes it's referred to, is completely normal, right? And as I'm sitting here and listening to Mr. Petgrave, one of the things that came up for me is the importance of how you talk to yourself about yourself, right? And so some of the things that really are impactful is the use of comparison, or the idea that I tell myself I should, or I must, or I have to be perfect in this area, which then, right, creates this sense of stress and overwhelm. And when we don't feel like we're meeting the mark, then we start to feel as if we are not competent, or we are not meant to be in this space. And so throughout my life, I definitely have had those moments where I questioned if I was able to. But I think one of the major factors in helping me navigate that has been supportive villages, communities, friends, but also mentors that can identify that this is a part of the journey. I had shared with Dr. Sadler at one point in high school, I was so excited because I got into one of the schools of my dreams. And I remember the college guidance counselor secretary kind of dissuading me from going to the school, and identifying that I might not have the means to sustain myself while there, and that I wouldn't fit in. And so not only is it what we tell ourselves about ourselves, but we have to be mindful of what other people tell us about ourselves. And if we internalize that and allow that to define us, or to impact our goals and dreams and motivations moving forward. So I think the syndrome is something that touches everyone from every walk of life. However, I think in order to combat it, recognizing those thoughts, right, really challenging them and recognizing that you're here for a reason. And if you were not chosen, right, you wouldn't be here. And so that means something. And then really connecting to the people, the supporters, your emotional resource team, and your mentors that can kind of help you in recognizing that you have everything that you need. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of time because it's a new environment.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you. Miss Lee, your comments or your experience.
Yes, I would say I've definitely dealt with imposter syndrome, probably dealing with it today. Definitely probably dealing with it today as well. I don't think it's something that goes away magically, but I do think something that has helped me cope with it a lot is just accepting sometimes I don't know. It's okay. And something we've mentioned before, as we move on, we've seen some challenges in our academic progress. We're kind of used to being all right academically. And I also saw that shift when I went to school a little bit. And I realized I did get in on my intellect, but I didn't need to have everything when I got there. And of course, we get into opportunities on many things that we have, whether that's our personality and other things that we can offer. But I think unless you bribed your way there, there's really, you have purpose there. You were chosen for a reason. And something as an MBC page that we do our tours all the time. So we're taking people around the building, and one of the first things they teach you, if you don't know an answer to a question, there's a lot that we're learning within the 2 weeks that we're able to give these tours. But it's okay to say, I don't know, when a tour guest comes up to you and they ask you a very niche question, especially when they try to trip us up sometimes. And you can just say, I'm going to look into that, or I'll find out for you later. But it's very, very okay to not know now, especially if you feel like you can find out later.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's so much information. Like there's can't be anybody, even the people who do well on Jeopardy, they still don't know everything.
Right.
You know a lot, but you don't know everything. So thank you for sharing. All right, Miss Bennett, talk to us about your experience with imposter syndrome.
Okay, so I think I've definitely had a lot of struggles with imposter syndrome, especially because I guess I consider myself a high achiever, and I really have always just been the type of student who tries to get top grades and be in the top of the class. And I think that that's really like it's those type of students that have or tend to struggle with imposter syndrome. Um, and I have also seen this in the research that I've done for the newsletter, my Dear We're Achievers newsletter that I forgot to mention in my introduction, which helps high achieving students overcome mental blocks like imposter syndrome. But yeah, I think that it's really common, especially in high achievers, but it can affect anyone. And like others were saying, I think it's really common and also really hard to just overcome in a second. It's not something that goes away. One of the things I noticed with my research on high achievers is most of their I guess like mindsets and issues like imposter syndrome kind of originate from what they learn as children, or like kind of just what they put in their mind, especially if you have, I think, like parents that are strict and are always pushing you, especially typically academically, then it's easy to kind of fall into a mindset of like thinking you are kind of only worthy if you're achieving, and then that leads to perfectionism, which leads to all these like interconnected issues. I feel like um, people, what I call it is like the overachiever syndrome. Like people or students or adults just with perfectionism and imposter syndrome tend to have like other all these other tendencies like overthinking, overworking, overcommitment, and it's kind of just like an interconnected web. And that's part of why it's really hard to like get over issues like imposter syndrome, because they're just so ingrained in you typically. Um, and I think that I faced it the most, um, Kind of when I think mostly in 9th and 10th grade, because I was still doing well then, but the other students that were kind of smart in my class or were getting high grades, they were able to solve things really fast, and I'm more of like a slow thinker, and just I typically don't just try to come to conclusions or like just blurt out answers in seconds. I like think really deeply about things, and that made me think that I kind of wasn't really smart. Maybe it was just all of my like the fact that I study a lot more than the average person. Maybe that's the only reason why I was doing well, and that affected me for a while. And I was kind of able to be redirected from those thoughts from mainly from my parents. But yeah, I think also like others were saying, I think it's also really important to just constantly remind yourself of the evidence that is present, showing that you are like worthy and you are smart. Um, Really, it's typically just irrational thoughts because um, a lot of students with imposter syndrome, they'll have like all A's and they'll be doing all this stuff, all these extracurriculars and activities, very impressive. They're just very impressive, and they just can't seem to see it. They just can't seem to see that they are smart and how impressive and awesome they are. So I think if you just like keep reminding yourself of the evidence that shows um, all of your achievements and your worth and just all that you've accomplished. Um, that also really helps with overcoming imposter syndrome. But like I said before, it's not something that will go away in an instant.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think for myself, even though the term was not around, I think I probably had some of it in high school as I started at a predominantly diverse high school, probably most of it actually, probably maybe 90% African American, then went through the A Better Chance program also, then went to this PWI. And I'm like, okay, am I supposed to be here? I guess I am, because they say on paper I'm kind of smart, but that learning curve, I went from getting straight A's to now all of a sudden I'm getting C's, and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not supposed to be here. So that was kind of a struggle, but you all are lucky, especially the graduates and you, and then Ms. Pierson Mutis is helping students through that. So I don't know if that was available when I was in school, because again, I'm like, I don't know if there was anyone I could have talked to about what I was going through. So I think it's good that we're talking about the village and having that connection and talking yourself out of the, no, I'm not supposed to be here, but saying, no, yes, I am supposed to be here. I've done the work. I can do it. I don't know everything, but I can make it through it. So thank you for sharing on that topic. So let's go into the topic of microaggressions. So that's also a term that definitely did not know about till maybe about 15 years ago. And then when I think back to school, I'm like, oh my gosh, were people saying stuff like that? And it just kind of went over my head. So let's talk, and then especially, if you went from a predominantly diverse environment to maybe a PWI, even going to an HBCU, what was it like? Were there any microaggressions that you dealt with or are dealing with, and how are you addressing them, or how did you address them? So let's start with Ms. Pierson Mutis.
Yeah. Microaggressions are like mosquito bites, right? And so some people get more than others, and there's a reaction to that. And sometimes you question yourself and you're like, wait, did that just happen? And I remember being in grad school, and at the time I was pregnant with my son, and I remember another advisor. For all the advisors out there, please understand, right, how impactful your roles really are and how you can impact people in their journey. I remember her saying, well, you can't complete your studies because you don't have the ability to pay for a nanny, right? And I was kind of stuck and just unable to respond appropriately in that experience, because I couldn't understand, one, why she said that, why she made assumptions about who I was, what my situation was, what my support system looked like, the resources I had. And so, just recalling that experience, and a very covert, right, sharing about who she perceived me to be without even knowing me in circumstances or situation. And so, yeah, microaggressions are powerful. They sting. And it can also lead to, right, that internal doubt about who you are and your ability to successfully be in a particular environment or space. And I think sometimes in certain spaces, as you're making note of the aggression, people may have a hard time receiving or understanding, right? And so within the corporate world, as I support clients, I'm always telling them about the importance of ERGs, connecting with other people, having these safe and shared spaces where you can talk about what happens and how to navigate. Once again, the environment and the support that you have along the way, I think, is invaluable, because sometimes we're made to feel like it's us. And we need to have people to really throw things off of and say, can you believe this just happened? How do I navigate this? Right. And so I can't say how valuable it is to have support mentors, ERGs, thought partners to really get through these experiences that are unfortunate and should not happen.
Okay, thank you. Can you just specify what ERGs mean? Because I don't think I'm...
Employment resource groups.
Okay.
So within companies, right, we'll have different employment resource groups based on commonalities. So there may be, an African American employee resource group. There may be a HBCU resource group, and people are able to come together and share space based on the shared experiences.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bennett, you want to comment on any microaggressions you've experienced?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have been lucky for most of my life to have been in, I have been in TWIs almost my whole life because I've went to private schools. But these were generally not, I guess there was not a lot of aggression or violence or anything of that sort. Most people are very nice. There's no kind of like extreme racism or anything like that, and I'm very fortunate that that has been my experience. But I think the main time that I had some microaggressions, or I faced some microaggressions, was actually in elementary school, and I didn't understand it really at that point. So I think it's really only been until recently that I've understood that a lot of the stuff I went through at that school was rooted in racism, and they were kind of microaggressions. Um, for example, I remember my sister and I, we were still doing well at that point, and we were, I think, um, one of the smartest kids in the school. And so when it was time for the award ceremony, there were a bunch of awards for different subjects, and they would just give a lot to us because we were just doing so well in all the subjects. But I didn't notice this as a kid, but my parents told me that there were a lot of interesting reactions from the crowd when the parents would come to the ceremonies. They would just judge us every time, and that actually led to the school having to kind of like condense the awards. So there were like kind of just less awards to give out so that they could kind of please the parents. And I still wasn't I just wasn't paying any attention to that as a kid. But also I had some difficulties with my friend there too, who was white. But when I guess I would do something that I guess like unpurposefully, that maybe like hurt her feelings or she was uncomfortable with, then I think she almost like, I don't know, I guess kind of made me do some things like, I don't know, maybe she would uh FaceTime me and then she would um make me do like push-ups or something, which isn't like, it doesn't seem like it's kind of related to us just being kids, but at the same time, I think it was kind of weird, and probably rooted in the fact that I was Black. So, um, but yeah, I think that's, I mean, the most that I've experienced. But I think, luckily, I wasn't really that aware of these things as a kid, so I didn't try to seek support because I didn't see anything wrong with it at the time. But I think for someone who is a little bit older and understands um, the, I guess, discrimination that's happening in those situations, just, yeah, I would say just surround yourself with people who love you. Just don't read into it too much, especially like, little comments. Just, I would just say ignore them. That's the advice that my parents have always given me. Just try to ignore them to the best of your ability. Um, don't read too much into them, and just remember your worth. And once again, all of your achievements, and just that, usually the people who are um, saying these things to you or doing these things to you are just not good people in general, or they're just strangers. So just, yeah, um, just don't read into it too much, and make sure you have community that can support you.
Yes, thank you. Miss Lee, do you have any comments on microaggressions?
Yes, I've definitely experienced it. I think you notice the difference when you're in two drastically different environments. I went to a predominantly white high school and then I went to an HBCU. So it's not really until you're out of it that you start to notice a lot of it as well. And of course, as you get older, you don't realize how many things you were unaware of as you were younger, simply. And it's very easy to beat yourself up about what happened in the past, especially if you didn't address it in a way you think you would now, or even in a way you wish you could now. But I think that's something you're meant to learn as you go through. And especially during my classes in education is how I notice the biggest difference. When you're in a predominantly white environment, you don't realize just how catered towards a white centric education you have. When I was studying theater, even in high school, a lot of it was, all right, here's one chapter maybe on a different culture, but majority you're gonna hear a lot about white attitudes and white pictures. So even if we went over color casting or how the phrase "I don't see color" isn't as beneficial as some would think, I remember with the play Streetcar Named Desire, there's a character named Stanley who does a terrible assault at the end. And as we're talking about color consciousness with casting and how they didn't want to make him a Black man once they did cast it, so many of my peers were confused on what would that insinuate. Anyone can do such an assault. Why does it have to not be a Black man? And I knew for myself why I didn't need to be, but I didn't know how to articulate it to everyone else. And that was something I used to beat myself up for quite a bit. But when I got to an HBCU, I just realized that's never really something I had to do. A lot of our education was centered around Black films and Black filmmakers. It was so much easier to dive into. And I had plenty of teachers who were non-Black as well. And the spectrum of what we talked about and what we explored felt a lot more inclusive for sure. So I think that's something that kind of innately comes with the HBCU education. And I really appreciate it, especially in TV and film, where representation is kind of paramount in what I pursue as far as what I want to do in entertainment and media. But yes, microaggressions can be a bit infuriating when you're actually facing them. I I don't tend to put stress on myself. I think it happens so often that you probably don't realize, and you yourself might be doing it to others for sure. Even small conversations about Love Island, and I would, say maybe that's not the best way to talk about this specific person, or there's more to that than you think. I know you see it one way, but trust me, there are different attitudes that come from different cultures. It's not simply what we see on the exterior. So a lot of it is a correction for sure, but I know everyone needs correction in and of themselves, and to beat yourself up about not correcting someone is something I tend not to do anymore, but definitely when you're in a comfortable environment, it's a lot easier to do.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing your experience. Mr. Petgrave, can you comment on microaggressions?
Yeah, for sure. I think microaggressions are super interesting because I think sort of like everyone has sort of hinted at here, sometimes they can go unnoticed for like a long periods of time. And oftentimes, at least in my case, it's had to be other people that have kind of sort of pointed it out for me, sort of years later. And another interesting aspect to microaggressions is that sometimes you're kind of contemplating or battling with the fact of like, do they come from a lack of care? Do they come from a lack of knowledge? Because I don't think not everyone who you might experience a microaggression from, I think has some sort of deep malice in their heart or anything like that. But oftentimes it's sort of sometimes how they sort of make sense of something that might be hard for them or difficult to understand. One scenario that I can think of is at my former high school. Once I graduated and was in college, I was probably in my sophomore year. I learned from a close faculty member of mine that there was someone sort of describing my story about how I got into Columbia, et cetera. And they characterized it as such that, I came from a single parent household, which that person knew that was very far from the case, because they met my father. My father has been at the school multiple times. So it was just an interesting way to characterize me, even though I believe that person was trying to say something good, but then it's just tough. Like, what does that mean? Does that sort of change your view on me? Why was that sort of your go-to view? So I think microaggressions are just interesting because, I think you'll spend a lot of time sort of contemplating sort of what's really the true root cause of them. And then you'll always face them in your life. And like I said before, you might not necessarily notice it in the moment. You might even notice microaggressions that are done outside of yourself to your spouse, your friend, before you notice what's being done to you. So, yeah, just very, very interesting. And I think we all experience it and will likely continue to experience it.
Yes, no, absolutely. So any things in retrospect that you think, as we're talking to college students, anything else that we can say to them as far as microaggressions, anything else comes to mind that would be to kind of prepare them for them and how to handle them?
I mean, I do believe that it's important to let people know the impact of the experience. As noted, people may not necessarily be coming from a place of malice, but if this is a relationship that is going to be sustained, it's important to let people know how they affect you. And so just sharing, the impact of the experience, I think is important as a way to educate, right? So that they don't injure or harm anyone in the future with their perceptions that may be rooted in things that they were taught or learned, or a different way that they're perceiving others around them, and giving them that feedback, I think is helpful. I also think it's important to recognize that some people are going to experience more microaggressions than others, right? Unfortunately, based on ethnicity or perceived race or ableism and a host of all isms, right? And so recognizing that when someone responds in a way that you might perceive maybe incongruent, it might be because they experience this a lot, right? People say things about them or maintain perceptions about who they are that is not rooted in their identity. And so I think it's important also to validate people's experiences as they share the impact of what has happened to them.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to comment additionally? Okay.
I just want to say I completely agree.
Okay, thank you. So, Ms. Lee, you mentioned something, so it's going to segue into our next question. Your transition from a PWI to an HBCU. And Mr. Petgrave, I know you went from a PWI to a PWI. So if you both want to just share anything else on the transition and what else you wish somebody would have told you going into those situations.
Well, that's quite interesting because I didn't go to school with the intention of going to an HBCU. I applied to Howard because their deadline was open a little later than others, and I had a fee waiver, so I said, why not? And I wanted to go to University of Maryland, actually, because they had a pretty good global studies program. And I followed the money. So I ended up at Howard University. It was also pretty close, and DC sounded beautiful. And when I visited, I enjoyed it quite a bit. But I was really reluctant in my entrance. I wasn't really there because, I feel like I need Black community. I was like, this is a great education I'll continue to get and can afford. So I will definitely take it for what it is. And I genuinely think it's where I was meant to be. I'm so happy I followed that path. And it comes from, and this seminar or this webinar, I guess this is its primary source, not necessarily what was in the classroom, but outside of the classroom, connection, clubs, finding my place and finding myself. It sounds so vague, but truly it was so much easier to do it amongst people who I guess we already jumped over a barrier of entry when it came to friendship or connectedness or relationships. And of course, there are connections you have with multicultural people, but there's a misnomer when it comes to HBCUs that they're one-dimensional, they're not very diverse, and that is the farthest thing that you can find. I met plenty of people I don't like there too, so it was really a transformative experience. It's not that I hated high school. I didn't have the greatest time, but I didn't realize or pinpoint what I felt like I was missing was maybe community or belonging, or just a sense of there's more than just me here, because I was one of maybe 3 or 4 Black girls in my grade. So it felt a little difficult, and none of us were close. And through college, I became close with one of them who I actually went to high school with. And I just didn't understand why I couldn't find that connection with her when we were in high school. And then in college, we became best friends, lifelong friend now. So I don't know how to exactly explain it. I don't think it's as easy as the environment changes everything. But in this case, there is a very large coincidence that I cannot deny. So I very much appreciated going to an HBCU.
Nice.
I'll add to that quickly. I think my experience was a bit different because I went to a PWI, but I will say that I feel like at a place like Columbia, and I'm sure other colleges and universities across the nation as well, there are so many people who come into the school that you're kind of able to sort of forge your own community. And there are multiple communities that have already been forged. So I remember coming into Columbia, I kind of thought, I'm going to be sort of the only person of my kind, the only person from, the Newark, New Jersey area. I felt like I might be super unique. But then I went there and that was actually not the case. There were a number of folks like me, and that was really great to see. I think back to it, obviously when we talk about sort of communities and organizations, few organizations that I think back to are the Caribbean Student Association, the Black Student Organization, and sort of others as well that were like like all of those. And I feel like those communities really helped me in particular, really sort of find my footing and find community at a PWI. At times where it felt like, I don't want to say it felt like I was at an HBCU, but it felt like that community, like I had a core group of friends that we did share commonalities, whether folks from, Caribbean, Jamaica, again, folks who were from Newark, folks who were Black. It just you kind of figure out in college that you're able to forge some of those communities, and especially going into a place like a PWI, that you kind of learn that you might have had preconceived notions about the institutions that might have been false, and you kind of end up being gladly, your perspective changes.
Thank you. And Ms. Pierson Mutis, what was the shift for you? You went to an HBCU, but what was the demographics at your high school?
It was a predominantly white high school. New York City is so interesting, right? Because it's diverse, but then people kind of go into their communities, and the communities may not be as diverse. So going to school, there were, people represented from different cultures and ethnicity, but the majority in Queens, where I was attending school at the time, the majority of the people did not look like me. However, I will say that going to an HBCU was a sip of refreshing water. I was just taken with the experience, and being in Baltimore, where Morgan State is located, and just turning around and seeing the variety of people. And like Jasmyn noted, we're not a monolith, right? And so there's people from the West Indies, there's people from the West Coast, there's people from the East Coast, the Midwest. And there's just a wonderful experience of learning about your people in a different way. And so I was just taken with the experience, and wound up living there for 10 years. Because I didn't want to come back home. Ultimately, I did, and continued my graduate studies. But I just think for me, it was really a transformative experience in learning more about myself and learning more about my culture and other people within the diaspora. And I think if you have the opportunity, it's something you should definitely embark upon.
Yeah, I wish I had done that. I went to Barnard undergrad, and then I was a commuter student, so I really didn't have that bonding with from a PWI to another PWI. But I know on campus, and Mr. Petgrave can probably attest to that, our Black Students Union was really strong back in my day, and I was in college during the time of the Cosby Show and A Different World, and I never got to experience those meetings because they would have to start after those two shows started, and I had to get myself to Port Authority and catch the bus back home. So I kind of missed that part of the community that we had on campus. But I did make some friends. I do have a lot of, I would say my closest friends are people that I met while at school. They're all Haitian like me as well. So you did have that community part to kind of help you through what was happening, whether it was academically in school. So Ms. Bennett, as the only non-collegiate person yet, so how do you see yourself? Or have you broadened your search for schools to include HBCUs or not, or PWIs, or how would you advise other high schoolers in your situation?
I mean, I think personally, especially because I'm trying to go into medicine, and I've always aimed for top schools, I guess, or I've always wanted to go to a top school. I've always wanted to go to an Ivy, so that's, I guess, what or I guess that's the goal. But I mean, I have to get accepted, so that's the issue. But I think that I'm obviously, my college list is still not finalized, and I have been considering HBCUs like Howard and Spelman. But I think that it kind of just depends on what you want. Um, I think I have always been able to find people like me, though I've gone to PWIs, I've always seemed to find my community at these schools. I mean, maybe not in elementary, but I think I've always kind of been in diverse friend groups. And I just never really felt, um, I guess, like I couldn't find my people at these schools, or just I didn't have community. We also have BSU at my high school, so that's another thing that I'm involved in, and it also helps because there's not a lot of Black people at our school, but um, there's just a lot of diversity, um, even if there's not a lot of I guess Black people. There's a lot of um, mixed people as well, or just a lot of different races, and I feel like um, it's kind of um, I guess made me feel more kind of open in any group. I just feel like a lot of our friend groups are just very diverse, including mine. And people at my school, we just don't really have issues fitting in, um, because, like I said, I've been very fortunate to not have faced much racism at the schools that I've gone to. Um, and for that reason, I think that because I haven't um, felt major issues with my race or finding people like me at my school, I feel like I will be okay going to a school that is PWI. Um, and I think that I'd also be open to go to an HBCU, but I think that I wouldn't have any issues with a PWI either. So I think that it's okay either way. But I think that, yeah, like I said, it just depends on what you want and your experiences. I think if you have experienced PWIs and it's felt uncomfortable, or you really enjoy the community in clubs like BSU, and you feel like you really, really want to be in an HBCU over a PWI, then I think you should follow that. Um, but yeah, I think it just depends on how you feel. Um, and I think in my case, I'm really comfortable in either situation. But I would just say um, listen to your intuition, listen to your gut. If you feel more comfortable in communities like HBCUs, then um, don't. I mean, nothing's holding you back from going to an HBCU, and um, yeah, and I think if you're comfortable with either, then just pick the school based on um, what else it offers. But yeah, I mean, I would just say it really depends on your experiences.
Oh, yes, absolutely. But just to throw something out about the HBCU, since you mentioned the sciences, about 27% of African Americans who graduate with science majors are coming out of the HBCU. So just so you know that, throwing that out there to you. And my undergrad school actually had a partnership with Spelman, which I would have loved to do as a junior. Your junior year students from either one can have the opportunity to experience that. So I think that's pretty good. And then when I think back on my elementary school year as well, actually, Miss Pierson Mutis, I also grew up in Queens between Long Island City, went to school in Astoria and Woodside, lived in Cambria Heights for a bit, which so diverse. So I think maybe having that in my background also with me might have been helpful, that maybe when microaggressions happen or whatever, that I didn't really notice it because I've been around so many different people and cultures and things. So I think that really helped to strengthen me a little bit. So anything else that the college graduates or us adults who've been out of college for a few years want to comment on going to college? Anything that you wish somebody would have told you? What, on any topic? It doesn't have to be on microaggression, or just like you're living your life outside the classroom. What do you wish people would have told you besides, yes, go to the library and make sure you talk to your advisor? But what other advice to help navigate that time of being on your own, possibly for the first time, away from home, and not being able to just go in your parents' room and just lay on the bed and say, oh my gosh, I had such a bad day? So what else can we tell our future college people? Don't all jump at once.
I'll start. One of the things that comes up a lot in working with students who are currently matriculating, sometimes when they are far away from home or coming from another country, it can be quite an adjustment. And so I think taking advantage of all of the resources on campus, the opportunities to join clubs or to participate in social outings can be really supportive for students who are navigating that difficulty in adjusting. The other thing I would say is take advantage of opportunities to study abroad, take advantage of opportunities to do internships outside of, the institution. I wish I would have capitalized on those. At that time, I was really focused on making money. So I'm in school and I'm working and I'm trying to adult. And I think there's real value in being present in the experience. Also, really cultivating and curating those friendships, right? I've heard everybody talk about the importance of those connections with friends and friend groups, and really just being present and making friends intentionally. I think right now it's very easy to get lost in your phone. It's very easy to get lost in your studies, and sometimes we can isolate. And I think it's important to step outside of ourselves and really be present in this once in a lifetime experience. It's really 4 years and then it's gone. And I think being intentional about what you want to achieve, accomplish, and also experience before setting foot on campus is important so that you can get the most out of the experience.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think being present is super important. I definitely want to double click on that point because it goes by so quickly. And then you'll look back at it as some of the best years of your life. And then you just want to make sure that you're present, and I think be present in all aspects. So, when it comes to your academics, be present. When it comes to your friendships, be present. And also to add to sort of just when you think of opportunities, there are certain opportunities to join groups. There are certain opportunities to sort of go abroad. There are a plethora of opportunities when you're in college. And one thing I'll say is don't feel as if any opportunity is too good for you or that you're not good enough for any particular opportunity. If it's something you want and you're hearing about, don't shy away from it if it's something that you truly want. And I also just want to say one additional thing. At a place like Columbia, one thing that I wish, and I feel like all the other sort of, Howard, this applies to Howard and all the other sort of big colleges that I have friends that have went to, really take advantage of your support groups, whether that's, again, I know we talked about counselors, but even when it comes to like things like financial aid, really, if you have a question or you feel like something's off, really ask those questions. Don't shy away from it. You're already in the school. The worst that you can kind of get is a no, and really be persistent. That's one thing I wish, maybe I could have, asked financial aid for some more money or something like that. But I think really just because there were folks who you learn afterwards that do it, and they get positive responses. So yeah, that's one thing I definitely would have folks focus on, especially, finances. Finances, of course, are a big thing. But if you're having any struggles financially, lean into your tuition department, financial aid department, and lean into folks. Try to find the answers, because someone will help you.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I would say when it comes to the classroom, of course, you're there to learn, but number one, say hi to whoever's sitting next to you. This goes through to senior year. You're not only there your freshman year to make friends, there will always be a new connection that not only can be made, but I think needs to be made through all of your years. If you so have the luxury of not working your first year of school, I would recommend. I did work subsequent years over time because of that first year, but having that first year to acclimate yourself, living on your own, I love my mom and my dad because living on my own was hard, but I was able to very quickly adjust and acclimate, not only on myself, but with the friends and the people who I said hi to who sat next to me in class. So that helped quite a bit. And then when it comes to all of my development, I think, well, all of my development is a bit presumptuous, but a lot of my development came from outside of the classroom. I joined any club that sounded remotely interesting. So a lot of them were film clubs, but if I was interested in like K-pop dancing, join that club because you will find someone with another common interest and you might dive into that as well. A lot of these clubs are non-binding too. So if you have a non-binding club, go to the meeting and give it at least 2 to 3 meetings before you decide, I don't want to do this anymore. And I am only where I am with my internships and in my current job because of the programs I applied to. That was the T. Howard Foundation as well as HBCU in LA, which the latter sponsored for me to be out in LA. So they paid for the full summer, my housing, and gave me a paid internship. And the prior one gave me a paid internship close to home. I would not have gotten those internships off of LinkedIn. I hate to say it, those lists that they have and the links they have us applying to really help to streamline a lot of what you're doing. So don't think applications and applying to internships are the first step. The first step is club involvement or programs that you can apply to. Anything that sounds remotely interesting and you can afford, please sign up for.
Oh, absolutely. Because those 4 years, as we said, fly by. So take advantage of everything because before you know it, you graduate and you have to start working and getting up early in the morning, so definitely take advantage of those opportunities that come up. Anything else anybody want to add? Oh, Jasmyn, I wanted to go back on Miss Lee, I should say, on talking about your first year you was during COVID. So how was that adjustment going from being a college freshman at home and then going onto campus? Anything you would have done differently or
Yes. I would say it actually made it a bit better going into sophomore year. I know I was a bit worried about making friends and connection, especially being a year behind, but because everyone was a year behind, everyone was very interested in connecting with everyone else. That first year, I didn't realize the experience I was missing out on. I wasn't that excited to go away for school personally, and that's because of just where I was at the time of my life and mentally. I wasn't really that excited to be on my own and away from family, but once it happened, the year was definitely a great warm-up. Being at home, I think we all figured we needed to get out, and so as soon as I got there, it was a very much easy transition because everyone else was kind of in it with me. Sorry to say there were no struggles to everyone. It wasn't too hard to fit into my sophomore year and to continue the momentum through my junior and senior year as well.
Okay, good. Yeah, like I said, if I didn't before, I spent 3 years commuting from Jersey City to Manhattan for school, and then I finally on my senior year moved onto campus. So that was definitely eye-opening and just an experience that I'm glad I was able to have because life on campus is so different than being a commuter student. So I definitely recommend that to everyone. At least try it, at least the first year if you can. If you don't like it, You can make those adjustments, but it's definitely something that we all want to try and do. So I'm going to go to Miss Bennett. We're going to, if you want to talk a little bit more about your High Achievers Club, and we're going to post the QR code to the newsletter that she sent out, so people can you can scan it and you can get the information on what she's sending out. If you're a high school student, you may want to, connect with her and see. And who knows, if you're a senior, you might end up at school together and you could say, hey, I met the founder of this club. So I think it's really great that you're able to see that in you and be able to share it with other people. So if no one else has anything else they'd like to share, anybody have anything burning that just popped into your head that you want to share with the audience or anything? Nope, we all good? Okay.
Real quick, I just want to give further explanation on the newsletter.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I basically, the newsletter, like I said before, it's it is a weekly newsletter. I post multiple times a week, and it is meant to help high achieving students overcome their mental blocks like perfectionism and imposter syndrome. But it also does this in a unique way because I use medical analogies. I compare issues like perfectionism to a medical disease to kind of like stress its urgency and help students who are unaware of the negative effects of these issues understand more about how these issues typically aren't very, I guess, essential to their success and are actually harming them more than they're helping. And I also break down actionable habits at the end of every article that are very, very easy to do. And I try to make them short because I know that it's directed towards high achieving students who have a lot on their plate. But yeah, I think using medical analogies was kind of my creative way of blending science and writing. And I think as a high achiever myself, I think it definitely kind of helps to see the overachiever issues in a different perspective or from a different perspective. But yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. I had to unmute myself. Thank you for sharing on the newsletter. And I want to thank everyone for taking time this evening to share with our audience on life outside of the classroom. We're always ready for the books, but there's a whole lot going on when you leave the lecture hall or the lab. So I want to thank Ms. Jasmyn Lee, Mr. Korey Petgrave, Ms. Nygera Pierson Mutis, and Ms. Soferri Bennett for joining us this evening. And also we want to close out by thanking our partners, NAAHP, College Cafe, Parent Matters, and Golden V for being our sponsors in this college planning webinar series. So thank you, everyone. Hope you all have a great evening and stay tuned for our next episode next month. Thank you so much and have a great night.
Good night.
Thank you.